when a woman's body is discovered in an Ohio sewer. Police struggle to unlock the mystery of who she is and how she died. Finding evidence of murder, they begin tracking down her killer. With few clues and no direct evidence, prosecutors take up the challenge of keeping a meticulous killer off the streets forever. When a mysterious death becomes a baffling homicide, an Ohio River Valley community is gripped by fear. Prosecutors Ginny, Conley, and Scott Durig need to bring to justice the elusive murderer of a young woman.
Someone killed her. And the bottom line of this case was, this case is a whodunit. It's not a how did they do it or why did they do it. It was a murder, and we are there to seek justice.
The historic Ohio River Valley runs along the border between Ohio and West Virginia. On the East Bank, the 16,000 residents of Marietta, Ohio, enjoy the quiet and safety of their small river community. On Saturday, May 25, 1996, police there received a 911 call. Sergeant Rick Meek responded.
There was an individual working for a lawn service company that responded to a business location. There was a storm sewer catch basin, and he looked down in this catch basin and saw what he thought at first was a mannequin having been placed into a catch basin as a practical joke. But after he looked at it for a while, he realized it was a person.
Marietta police, Washington County Sheriff's deputies, and fire department personnel had secured the crime scene by the time detectives arrived. They needed to inspect the catch basin.
Down in that catch basin was a woman inverted in the catch basin head first.
The grate was firmly in place above the woman. It was obviously not an accident. The investigators were careful to preserve evidence.
One of the first things we did was use a camera that is typically used by a chimney sweep to inspect the flue of a chimney. We lowered that into the catch basin and viewed the body from different angles to make sure there wasn't any physical evidence that would be destroyed if we extracted the body from the catch basin.
Determining that it was safe, they lowered an officer to tie an extraction line to the body.
We then used a tripod and extracted the body from the catch basin, and the body was placed on a linen cloth.
Although rigor mortis had begun to set in, it seemed she hadn't been in the catch basin long.
The victim appeared to be clean. Her hair even appeared as though it was wet. Her body was clean, her feet were clean. She had no shoes or socks on.
Officers placed paper bags over the woman's hands. If she had struggled with a killer, they might be able to recover minute evidence from under her fingernails.
One of the officers at the scene saw tire tracks, impressions close to the catch basin. Those tracks were cast, then set aside for evidence later if a vehicle would be discovered.
Police also found footprints in the dried mud nearby. They knew that the boot that made the print would have carried traces of mud away from the scene. Technicians collected samples of the mud and vegetation in the area. The mud tracks might eventually help connect a suspect to the crime scene, if a suspect were found. Since the woman's feet were clean, it was clear she had not walked to the muddy basin. Local residents began to gather, curious about the mysterious body. Officers later interviewed each onlooker, but none claimed to have seen anything unusual. The medical examiner's records listed the woman as Jane Doe.
Initially, we had no idea who the victim was. There was no identification found on the victim. No one immediately knew who the victim was.
Hoping neighbors had seen whoever dumped the body, officers canvassed the area. One resident mentioned seeing a car parked near the catch basin earlier that day.
Back over here towards the end of the street. Okay.
While walking his dog that morning, he had noticed the car, with an elderly man sitting in it alone. The car's license plate was attached to the grill, not in its usual place.
Do you remember anything else?
The neighbor couldn't remember the license plate number.
Yes, sir. Okay, thank you.
Police hoped the car's description would be enough to find the driver in the small community of Marietta. That afternoon, investigators held a briefing. They believed the body had been placed in the basin just a few hours before its discovery, but knew little else. They hoped an autopsy would offer more information about the woman's identity and how she died.
She said,
The medical examiner reported a lack of physical trauma to the body. There was no sign of fatal injury.
25-year-old to 30-year-old white female.
The tentative cause of death was listed as positional asphyxiation.
Positional asphyxiation is if you're placed in an inverted position or some position where your windpipe would be blocked off, would eventually cause your death because you couldn't breathe.
What the lab came back
The
with
body's
was
upside-down position in the catch basin seemed to support the medical examiner's findings. The woman appeared to be in her mid-30s and had been in excellent physical shape. The medical examiner took fingerprints so police could run them through their computer system.
no trauma to the
Investigators
hand whatsoever.
also tested a blood stain on the woman's sweatshirt.
It was found to have a different blood type than the victim, and that was secured to be later examined for DNA evidence.
We did drug
A
testing
toxicology
and
report
found
outlined the drug content in the body.
high dosage of antihistamine.
Medical examiner did tell us that there was a higher level than therapeutic dose of diphenhydramine hydrochloride, which is the chemical name for the active ingredient that one would find in sinus medicine or sleep medicine.
Though it wasn't enough to kill the woman, someone might have used the drug to sedate her.
125 pounds. She
But the drug had another, more common use.
What I examined her, she
The majority of residents here in the Ohio Valley area suffer some sort of sinus malady. Part of it's the topography, part of it's the Ohio River. At any rate, most people that suffer that take some type of sinus medication.
Running the victim's prints through the National Crime Information Center's computers, Meek learned the woman did not have a police record anywhere in the country. No local missing persons fit her description.
There was some rumor that there was a stripper missing from a neighboring city of Parkersburg, West Virginia.
Desperate to identify their Jane Doe, police followed up on the rumor. They interviewed employees of area strip clubs. No one recognized the woman from the catch basin. When police tracked down the dancer who was rumored to be missing, investigators again had nothing.
Call me, station.
Days after the body was found, police spotted the car seen near the catch basin by a neighbor. Its license plate was on the grill.
10-6 traffic.
The officer ran the plates and called in a detective.
222, 222.
The detective spoke to the elderly man who owned the car. He fit the description given by the neighbor who was walking his dog, but said he knew nothing about the dead woman.
Well, yeah.
After interviewing several acquaintances, police confirmed the man had been in the area of the catch basin visiting a friend.
Good seeing you. Have a good day.
A comparison of the car's tires showed they did not match the tracks left near the body, further eliminating this man as a suspect. Investigators still had no clue as to the woman's identity.
We contacted service organizations that provide housing for women that are victims of spousal abuse, and we were unsuccessful in determining who she was. We made a press release. We released a photograph of the victim in a newspaper in an attempt to identify her. We received a lot of phone calls from people that were concerned about their missing relatives.
Police followed up on every call, but each time they found the person in question alive and well. On Monday, May 27th, a call came in that broke the case open. Sharon Rousey said she had seen the newspaper story that morning.
I sat down here and glanced at the paper, noticed the headlines, and just scanned the article and thought, oh, that poor girl. And I started reading more in depth. And when I finally came to the description of the clothing that she was wearing when her body was found, I knew that it was Sheree.
20, 25, 30 minutes.
Sheree Petry lived with Sharon and her husband, Howard. She owned clothing that matched the articles found on the woman in the catch basin. They hadn't seen her in 3 days. Marietta police traveled across the Ohio River to nearby Williamstown, West Virginia. Detectives met with Howard and Sharon Rousey and one of Sheree's co-workers. Sharon Rousey told police Sheree was her cousin.
But we grew up together as sisters, so she was more like my little sister, but more than that, she was my best friend.
Sheree began living with the Rouseys in 1993, when she moved from Phoenix, Arizona to study sports medicine at the local college in Marietta. The 36-year-old returning student had won a full scholarship to the college.
She was so dedicated to her school that was her primary focus. She did work part-time as a massage therapist.
The Rouseys had last seen Sheree on Friday, before they went away for the Memorial Day weekend.
Okay, I've got a picture here.
She fit the general description of the victim, and since the Rouseys did Sheree's laundry, they were familiar with all her clothing, which matched that found on the body. Dental records confirmed the Rouseys' fear. Sheree Petry had been killed and dumped in the catch basin. Detectives hoped they would find a clue to the killer or the cause of death in the house. But there was no sign of forced entry or a struggle. The Rouseys said Sheree kept a date book, but it wasn't in her bedroom.
Mr. Rousey, don't touch a thing, okay?
Oh, sure.
Sheree's car was gone, yet her contacts and glasses were still in her bathroom. She couldn't drive without them. She might have been abducted from the house. Police finally knew the identity of the victim. but still had no idea who had killed her, how they did it, or why. On Saturday, May 25, 1996, Marietta, Ohio police recovered the body of Sheree Petry from a catch basin. She had been killed, but authorities didn't know how or by whom. 2 days later, they went to the house where Sheree lived with Howard and Sharon Rousey. Sharon told Sergeant Rick Meek that she had noticed something odd in the kitchen when they came home from their weekend trip.
She told me about these 3 teacups that she found in the sink when she arrived home from the Memorial Day weekend. And she said that she, at the time, thought that was unusual because they were only gone 2 days and there should have been only 2 cups, and there were 3.
Thank you very much.
The third cup indicated someone else had been there. But Sharon had washed the cups when she got home, so no fingerprints could be recovered. Detectives needed to determine Sheree's last known actions. They met with a co-worker who had seen Sheree on the morning of her death. She explained what happened that morning.
Sheree Petry was last seen alive when she arrived at her business location to pick up her portable massage table.
How you doing? Okay, how are you? Doing great.
Sheree Petry had an appointment that morning to go to someone's home and do massages.
She left around 8:20 a.m., but never made it to the appointment.
See you later.
Her body was found less than 5 hours later. No one knew what had happened during that time. Detectives believed she had returned home, showered, then was abducted from her house after having tea with someone.
Just give me a call, okay?
They needed to find that person.
Yes, sir.
Have a nice morning.
Sergeant Meek questioned the Rouseys about Sheree's personal life.
Hello. I asked them if she had any boyfriends, had she ever been married, that sort of thing. They told me that she really didn't have a boyfriend, but she did have a male friend that had also moved here from Phoenix, Arizona.
I think you're working.
His name was Dennis Rydbom. He had come to Marietta with Sheree to go to the same college she attended. The two spent a lot of time together and were friends. It seemed Rydbom wanted more, but Sheree told Howard Rousey the relationship was platonic.
A few times I had kind of teased her about, Dennis being her boyfriend, and she was very adamant, to almost to the point of becoming angry. No, he is not my boyfriend.
Police believed Rydbom might have seen Sheree after she left the beauty salon.
He certainly was someone that we wanted to talk to. We went to his home here in Marietta, and we were unable to find him. He had left Marietta. He had made a phone call back to the people he was living with and told them to tell the police that he had had dinner with her the night before.
Police were told Rydbom had spent the day of the murder helping a college friend move. Meek wondered why Rydbom hadn't called himself. He wanted to question Rydbom, but no one knew where he was. Later that afternoon, Sheree Petry's car was found, parked in front of the house of a friend who had left town for the weekend. Comparing the car's tires to the tracks left near the catch basin, police made a match. Whoever had dumped Sheree's body had used her car, then placed it where it wouldn't be noticed over the weekend. Meek believed the killer knew Sheree and her friends. Detectives met with many of Sheree's friends to learn more about the victim's relationship with Dennis Rydbom. Everyone agreed that Rydbom wanted a romantic relationship, but Sheree did not, according to prosecutor Ginny Conley.
I think they were pretty good friends.
She had been thinking for weeks that, listen, he's being persistent. He's wanting more out of this relationship than I'm willing to give. I just want to be friends.
What do you know about her? I know her disappearance.
One friend said Sheree had told her she was going to give Rydbom an ultimatum.
Normal. I mean, she didn't.
Sheree Petry told her that she didn't know what she was going to do with Dennis. He was becoming more and more insistent, and if he didn't stop, she would just have to tell him she wasn't going to see him anymore.
You know, he, I think, wanted
Sheree's
her
friends worried about what Rydbom's reaction would be.
to be good friends. And sometimes we
They said he was obsessive. Some even called him a stalker.
No, he's not. He seemed to.
Howard Rousey had the same sense.
But she wasn't interested.
He would, for example, call 4, 5, 6 times a day looking for Sheree and would want to know details like where is she, who's she with, when will she be back.
Police served a search warrant on the house where Rydbom had been staying.
At that point in the case, we knew who the victim was. We knew that she had had dinner with Dennis Rydbom the night before her death. We knew that she had a very high level of a medication that can make you very sleepy and drowsy in her system.
Ask you a couple of questions.
Searching his room for evidence, they recovered 2 important items from the
He's definitely
trash.
gone.
But yeah, it appears as though he would be gone.
We found 2 receipts that we connected to this crime. One was a receipt for nighttime sleep aid that was bought at a local drugstore, and the other was a grocery list of items that were bought for an Italian dinner that he and the victim had had the night before her death. County
There were no sleep aids left in the house.
Everything's set.
Detectives wondered if Rydbom used the drug to sedate Sheree. In Rydbom's footlocker, they discovered an unusual piece of prose.
It was a note written by Dennis Rydbom, and the title of it was 7 Principles of Stalking.
The note spoke of carefully tracking prey so that it can be easily killed. It was a chilling piece of evidence. If Dennis Rydbom had stalked and killed Sheree Petry, investigators needed to find him before he slipped away forever. Marietta, Ohio police were investigating the mysterious death of Sheree Petry, whose body was found in a storm-catch basin.
Thanks.
Sergeant Rick Meek's primary suspect was Dennis Rydbom, a friend of Sheree who had disappeared from the area. Rydbom had claimed to be helping a college friend move on the day of Sheree's death. Detectives went to interview the college friend, who now lived with his father.
We felt it imperative that we talk with him because he was, in effect, establishing an alibi for Dennis Rydbom that morning when Sheree Petry was murdered.
He confirmed Rydbom had helped him move on May 25th. He had arrived around 9:30 that morning and stayed about 2 hours.
Say around 9:20.
How does he get about? How did he even get here?
By bike. I mean, travels everywhere by bike.
He said he had no idea where Rydbom was now.
Comes to your mind.
He didn't even know he had left town. They needed somehow to find Dennis Rydbom.
Do you know what's going on?
Days later, they got an unexpected break.
Oddly enough, Dennis's friend's father was a retired detective sergeant from New Jersey State Police. That made our job just a little bit easier.
Shortly after police contacted them, the friend told his father that Rydbom had just called. The retired detective traced the call.
His father performed a function on the phone, *69,
The function caused the phone number of the last incoming call to be announced. He gave the number to Ohio police.
We were able to verify an address through the phone company. As a result of that, we were able to locate the whereabouts of Dennis Rydbom in Athens, Ohio. Officers went to that location.
Worried that Rydbom might hide or run, officers decided to enter the apartment under a ruse. The officers had viewed photos of Rydbom.
We have some company.
And found him in the apartment.
What's all this about?
That's him. You, Dennis Rydbom?
At first, the suspect gave a false name, but when confronted, he admitted his true identity.
Questions. Could you have a seat, please? Well, I just want to ask a few questions.
So far, they had no direct evidence that Rydbom was involved.
Something happened to her?
Why don't you have a seat and we'll talk?
But if he implicated himself in his statement, they could arrest him. When questioned about Sheree Petry,
When was the last time you saw her?
On Friday.
Rydbom said that he had had dinner with her on the night of May 24th.
We had some. Oh, it's not very far away.
He said he had nothing to do with her death and claimed he didn't know anything about the catch basin where her body was found.
Some important phone calls.
Officers spotted something that suggested otherwise.
Friday evening.
Dennis Rydbom had a book that he was reading when the officers approached him.
School textbooks. Nothing interesting though.
Contained within that book was a picture of a storm drain catch basin.
Why would you be reading something like this?
Dennis Rydbom was in the process of completing a summer project, and that was a book that was given to him by a professor.
It was a compelling piece of circumstantial evidence, but officers still didn't have enough for an arrest. They had to leave empty-handed.
And what does that have to do with that?
Word began to spread through the small community of Marietta that police suspected Dennis Rydbom in Sheree Petry's death. But no one knew exactly how Sheree had been killed.
We were still trying to determine how someone is placed in a storm drain catch basin upside down, even though they're sleepy from this medication. How does that cause their death?
Then an important clue surfaced at the college where Sheree and Rydbom took classes.
The school year had ended. The librarians were doing what librarians do. They were indexing books, straightening books, cataloging, and one of the employees there had noticed that there was a book laying open on its spine behind a bookshelf. It was open to a page on chloroform.
According to the book, the right dosage of chloroform could kill a person and wouldn't be easily detected in an autopsy. The college staff was aware of Sheree Petry's mysterious death and reported the book to police. Wood County prosecuting attorney Ginny Conley, who would later argue the case in court, remembers the find and its importance.
As a result of that information, the investigators requested that the medical examiner look to see whether or not there was any chloroform in Sheree's body.
The original medical examiner's toxicology test at autopsy did not screen for that chemical. He sent tissue samples away to be screened for chloroform.
They told us that contained within Sheree Petry's blood was 310 micrograms per milliliter of chloroform. To give you an indication as to the level, they said that that was the highest level ever recorded in a chloroform-facilitated homicide.
Finally, investigators knew exactly how Sheree Petry had been killed. Next, they needed to determine if Rydbom had access to the drug.
We went to the college. We found contained in their science rooms, their biology rooms, and so forth, a total of 14 bottles containing chloroform.
But no one could remember seeing Rydbom in possession of the drug. Once again, Investigators had tantalizing leads, but came up short of clear answers. If Dennis Rydbom had killed Sheree, he had covered his tracks carefully. In Marietta, Ohio, police suspected Dennis Rydbom killed college student Sheree Petry when she declined his romantic advances, but no physical evidence directly linked him to the murder. As the months passed, investigators' frustrations grew. Sergeant Rick Meek wasn't ready to arrest Rydbom, though he believed he knew what he had done to Sheree.
The morning of Sheree Petry's death, we suspect that he may have had tea or coffee with her that morning and put the sleep aid into her beverage. As a result of that, she would have become drowsy. We suspect at that point then he used chloroform, heavily soaked on a rag, to sedate her. And at some point she succumbed to the chloroform and died.
According to police, Rydbom put Sheree's body in her car.
He drove that car through Williamstown, across a bridge into Ohio and down South 7th Street, where he placed her body into the catch basin.
He then dropped off the car and rode his bike to his friend's house. With a warrant, investigators secured a sample of Rydbom's blood. They compared it to the stain found on Sheree's sweatshirt. They were the same blood type, but there were not enough DNA polymarkers on the stain for a positive DNA match. It seemed at every turn, investigators fell short of finding direct evidence.
Our case was at a standstill. We had certainly had enough to arrest him for murder. We had enough probable cause to suspect him for murder. I don't believe at that point that we had enough evidence to convict him for murder.
Police couldn't stop their prime suspect from leaving town. Claiming the community had labeled him a murderer, Rydbom moved back to Phoenix, Arizona. Sergeant Meek wasn't willing to give up. He traveled to Phoenix in November 1996 to interview the family Rydbom stayed with there.
We learned that the 17-year-old son of that family had shared a room with Dennis. In the process, he had seen a bag containing ladies' lingerie and underwear.
Meek called Sharon Rousey from Phoenix and asked her to check Sheree's room to see if any lingerie was missing. Because they had shopped together, she knew there should have been dozens of items, yet only a few remained.
As a result of that, we got a search warrant for his residence in Phoenix, Arizona, with the aid of the Phoenix Police Department. And we searched his home and found in excess of 40 items of ladies' lingerie and underwear in his possession.
To successfully prosecute Rydbom, Ginny Conley would need to prove that some of the items belonged to Sheree.
There was a lot of lingerie, like 4 bags of lingerie. And what we did was showed that to people who knew Sheree Petry during the investigation for them to determine if they could identify it. And several pieces of the lingerie were identified by these people that were familiar with Sheree.
On November 16, 1996, Dennis Rydbom was arrested in Phoenix and held until he could be transported back to Marietta, Ohio. But soon West Virginia prosecutors Scott Durig and Ginny Conley would take over the case from the Ohio authorities.
They determined that the death actually occurred where Sheree lived in Williamstown, West Virginia. So once that determination was made, the court basically ruled that the case was dismissed in Marietta and it was transferred over here to West Virginia.
The trial began in January 1998. Rydbom was charged with first-degree murder. Prosecutors knew it would be a difficult trial. Their case was entirely circumstantial. No one had seen the defendant in possession of the murder weapon. No one had seen him with the victim on the day in question. And no one had seen him dispose of the body.
We didn't have any direct evidence of a weapon or a crime scene actually with evidence in it that we could use. This case was basically putting together pieces of a puzzle. We had to take each little piece and make it fit together in order to get to the conviction in this case.
If prosecutors failed to piece the evidence together in a manner the jury could understand, that jury would acquit, and Rydbom would go free. Rydbom's court-appointed lawyer was defense attorney Patrick Radcliffe.
I felt that there was no stone that we did not turn over, no piece of evidence we didn't look at. And I felt confident that we would get a verdict in Mr. Rydbom's favor.
Before the trial began, the prosecution found an eyewitness.
Nothing but the truth.
Considered the state's strongest witness, he was the first to testify.
He saw the defendant driving Sheree Petry's car away from where the storm sewer is located in Marietta, Ohio. That witness was very crucial to the case because it placed Dennis at the crime scene where the body was found.
Yes, he is. He's right there. The man with the white shirt and the brown tie.
This key witness for the prosecutor, in our opinion, was very suspect because he took 6 months before he came forward with this information. Only when Mr. Rydbom's pictures began appearing in the paper when he was in Arizona and was arrested and brought back, that's when this individual came forward then with his identification.
The witness explained he had simply been nervous about getting involved at first. Prosecutors hoped the jury would still find him credible. The state called Sheree's co-worker to establish a timeline for the day of the murder.
Petry. It was 8 a.m. I was with a client. She came in, got her massage table out of the back of the room.
Timing was a very big factor, very crucial to the prosecution's case and also to the defense that was raised. Sheree Petry was seen alive at approximately 8 o'clock on the morning of her murder.
Prosecutors contended Sheree then went home, where she met Rydbom.
Dennis Rydbom had alibis around 9:30.
That left about 90 minutes, a narrow window of time in which to commit this type of murder. Prosecutors next called Sergeant Meek. He had done an experiment to prove that 90 minutes was enough time for the murder.
Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth?
Go!
They simulated the crime by having an officer ride a bicycle from Rydbom's house to the Rouseys. The trip to the Rousey home in Williamstown, West Virginia took 9 minutes. Beginning at the Rousey house, they used a mannequin in place of a body.
We picked the mannequin up, placed it into the car, then drove her car to Marietta from Williamstown to the location where the storm drain was, placed the mannequin in the storm drain, closed the lid, drove away. All this took less than 25 minutes.
Meek explained that left about an hour for Rydbom to commit murder.
It's gotta be the way he did it. It's gotta be.
But considering the details of this murder, the defense contended an hour was not enough time.
The state's theory is that this diphenhydramine came from sleeping pills that the killer administered to her, and then that the killer, after she was somewhat drowsy on this sleeping pills, then killed her with chloroform. In other words, this killing would have taken time. There's no time for Mr. Rydbom to have killed her.
Step down.
The prosecutors offered a theory as to how Rydbom had secured the chloroform, calling a secretary from the college Rydbom attended.
I'm kind of busy right now, trying to get some work done.
The secretary testified that before the murder, she had been working at the college when Rydbom came in to ask for her keys.
I left my books in the office again down the hall. Thanks.
Yeah.
Contained on the key ring that the secretary had loaned out were master keys to all the rooms in that facility.
After half an hour, the secretary went to look for Rydbom. She saw him headed back from the science lab area of the school,
Hey, Susie. Here you
where
go.
chloroform is kept. There was no reason why he should be in that area. Prosecutors also presented witnesses to explain motive.
Do you ever recall a conversation
A
with
close
Sheree
friend of
where she
Sheree's
talked
said they had talked about Rydbom 2 days before the murder.
Yes, I remember a conversation once. I told her I think
In that
Dennis
conversation,
really-
Sheree was basically saying to her, I don't know what I'm going to do about Dennis. He's persisting, wanting more of a relationship than just a friendship, and I don't want it, and I'm not sure what to do about it. And she's kind of thinking out loud, and she said, I'm just going to tell him that it's just going to be friendship, and if he wants more than that, I'm not going to see him anymore.
Me like this.
Prosecutors contended Rydbom was infuriated by Sheree's final rejection.
He wasn't going to have it that way and murdered her the next morning.
The defense presented the relationship in a different light.
We had ample evidence to show that there was no obsessive relationship here. They dined together, they studied together, they were friends. And there was never anything to say that they were other than friends, so that there was no obsessive relationship.
At each turn, the defense had raised legitimate questions to the prosecution's claims. Soon, a series of defense witnesses would place the state's case in jeopardy. Nearly 2 years after the body of Sheree Petry was discovered in a storm drain, Dennis Rydbom was on trial for her murder. Several days into the trial, attorney Bruce White rejoined the defense team.
Dennis Rydbom is a very bright, engaging, and sometimes charming character. He can also be a bit eccentric. I was fired 4 times during the course of my representation of Dennis.
Rydbom insisted on playing a hands-on role in his defense. He even petitioned the court to represent himself.
The judge heard Mr. Rydbom's motion and managed to persuade Mr. Rydbom to keep both Mr. Radcliffe and myself as counsel. I think at times maybe he was perceived as being controlling, and that may not have been inconsistent with the state's case.
Prosecutors contended Rydbom was not only controlling, but obsessive, keeping mementos of his victim. Police had recovered dozens of pieces of lingerie from the defendant's home in Phoenix, Arizona. Forensic testing revealed traces of Rydbom's seminal fluid on some of the lingerie. Prosecutors called Sharon and Howard Rousey to ask if they could identify any of the pieces as Sheree's.
Do you recognize exhibit number 20?
Yes, these are Sheree's. We went shopping together.
According to prosecutor Ginny Conley, these were the trophies of his crime.
The lingerie was very significant to the case because it basically tied Dennis to Sheree.
Both Sharon and Howard Rousey testified about the lingerie, with Howard remembering a specific clasp on one piece.
And how do you recognize it?
They all lived together and shared laundry duties, which is why he was able to say, hey, I recognize this piece of lingerie and this belonged to Sheree. And it made him more credible that he was able to identify a specific thing about a piece of lingerie that Dennis had in his possession.
26?
The defense had tried unsuccessfully to have the evidence suppressed, claiming it was prejudicial.
The admission of the lingerie evidence was a major issue. It allowed the state to present what is in essence character evidence. It presented a rather unseemly picture to the jury of Mr. Rydbom
Is this garment
engaged in
authorized
some
and
rather
sold by your store?
perverse behavior.
Yes,
The defense called an expert from the company who manufactured the lingerie
The SKU
in
numbers
an
on the
attempt to
tag.
discredit the witnesses who had
When did your
identified the
company
garments.
began to sell this?
We first introduced this in August of 1996.
That expert testified that some of the items, quote, positively identified by the Rouseys as belonging to Sheree were in fact not manufactured until after her death.
So if a person is asserted that he had seen this garment before 1996, they would be wrong?
That is correct. He would be wrong.
Though the defense could not account for every item, they did prove some of the lingerie could not have been taken from the victim's room by the defendant, as the prosecution alleged.
That is correct. They would be wrong.
They also presented cash receipts, showing that the defendant had bought much of the lingerie himself. It was a significant blow to the case presented by prosecutors Ginny Conley and Scott Durig.
The bottom line is the only thing that the defense has to do in any criminal trial, from illegal parking to first-degree murder, is raise a reasonable doubt.
Mr. Bernardo.
Another key witness for the defense was a former police officer turned private detective.
For 3 years.
He began testifying that a confidential informant told him a local thug had bragged about killing Sheree Petry.
No, I did not.
But did you have information you felt to be relevant?
Yes, I did.
And did that information indicate another suspect in this case? Is that right?
Objection, Your Honor.
Hey, we approach.
This is trying to get hearsay in the back
This
door.
evidence was nothing more than pure speculation. It was hearsay upon hearsay.
At a bench conference, the defense argued that the retired police officer should be able to testify on the confidential informant's behalf.
It's not admissible.
The judge disagreed
Final word. Objection sustained.
and threw out the officer's testimony. The defense next sought to explain the handwritten note recovered from Rydbom's footlocker. It was a transcription from a novel which discussed stalking prey. They called an English professor to comment on the stories in the novel.
What is your title, sir?
He said the references to stalking were symbolic, not a call to violence. The prosecution believed Rydbom modeled his actions after the stalking passages.
One of the stories discussed what a hunter does while he is stalking his prey. For the hunter to stalk and catch the rabbit, he has to learn where the rabbit lives.
All you have to do is divide. Well,
He has to learn where the
do that by
rabbit
breaking down,
drinks.
figuring out these other factors.
He has to learn where the rabbit plays and what the rabbit does. And then after he has all this knowledge, he can stalk that animal without that animal knowing it. And boom, bunny rabbit's dead. That's exactly what Dennis Rydbom did to Sheree Petry.
Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, in our
After
legal
5
system,
weeks of
it is
testimony,
important
both
that
sides rested.
the defendant is
The judge
innocent
instructed the
until
jury
proven
on
guilty
matters of
beyond
law.
reasonable doubt.
In West Virginia, there's no death penalty. The highest penalty that you can receive is a conviction of first-degree murder. The jury also has to decide whether or not they're going to recommend mercy. And if mercy is recommended, that means that a defendant is sentenced to life in prison, but after 15 years, that defendant is eligible for parole.
Has the jury reached a verdict?
Rydbom stunned everyone by requesting the jury not recommend mercy. The real killer, he said, should not be given mercy, and he would expect no less. After deliberating 3 days, the jury found Rydbom guilty of first-degree murder.
This court,
according to his
agrees with the
wishes,
verdict,
there would
finds
be
you
no
guilty
leniency in sentencing.
and sentences you to life imprisonment.
Rydbom will spend the rest of his life in prison without the chance of parole.
The verdict in this case meant to me that at least one person, that being Dennis Rydbom, hopefully will never have the opportunity to stalk and murder another human being, another innocent human being.